I was 34 years old when I learned that the woman I loved more than anything in this world had been planning my destruction for over 2 years. 34. That's supposed to be your prime, right? You're supposed to be building something, creating a life. Instead, I was standing in a courtroom watching my entire world collapse while she sat there with that smug smile on her face, her lawyer boyfriend's hand resting possessively on her shoulder like I was already erased from existence. $8 million. That's what they took from me. $8 million that represented 15 years of my life. 15 years of 80-hour work weeks. 15 years of missing birthdays and holidays and quiet Sunday mornings because I was building something not just for me, but for us. For the family I thought we were creating together. And in less than 6 months, it was gone, transferred, hidden, manipulated through legal loopholes I didn't even know existed until it was too late. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how a man loses everything while thinking he has it all. Her name was Miranda, and when I met her, I genuinely believed I'd found my person. You know that feeling? When someone walks into your life and suddenly all the cliches make sense? That's what it felt like. We met at a charity gala. I know. It sounds like something out of a movie, but that's really where it happened. I was there because my tech startup had just secured Series B funding, and my investors thought it would be good PR. She was there because, well, I later learned she was there specifically looking for someone like me. But I didn't know that then. Then, all I knew was that she was beautiful, charming, and seemed genuinely interested in the work I was doing. Not the money, or so I thought, but the actual work. The software we were developing to help small businesses manage their inventory and logistics. She asked questions that made sense. She laughed at my jokes, and when she touched my arm while talking, something in my chest just unlocked. We were married within a year. Too fast, everyone said. My mom pulled me aside before the wedding and asked if I was sure. My business partner, Dave, practically begged me to get a prenup. But I was in love, and love makes you stupid. Love makes you believe that protecting your assets means you don't really trust your partner. Love makes you sign everything over to joint accounts because we're a team now. God, I was such an idiot. The first 3 years were good. I mean, looking back now, I can see the cracks. I can see the way she always seemed more interested in the business's valuation than the business itself. The way she'd casually ask about which investors had the deepest pockets. The way she befriended the wives of my business partners, gathering information like she was running intelligence operations. But at the time, I just thought she was being supportive, interested, involved. We bought a house in Pacific Heights, a beautiful Victorian that cost more than I ever imagined spending. But Miranda convinced me it was an investment. We took vacations to Bali and the Maldives and the French Riviera. She redecorated every room 3 times because she could never quite get it right. And I said yes to all of it because I was making money faster than I could spend it. And what's the point of success if you can't enjoy it with the person you love? Then I met Ryan, her old friend from law school. He showed up at a dinner party we were hosting, and something about him made my skin crawl immediately. He was too polished, too smooth, with that kind of aggressive confidence that passes for charm in certain circles. He and Miranda spent most of the evening in the corner, talking and laughing, and when I asked her about it later, she just smiled and said, "Oh, Ryan's helping me understand some of the legal structures around the business. I want to be able to help you better." I should have seen it then. I should have asked why my wife needed to understand legal structures with some guy from her past instead of with our actual lawyers. I should have wondered why she was suddenly so interested in the mechanics of asset protection and corporate governance. But I didn't. I was too busy working on our next product launch, too focused on scaling the business, too trusting of the woman who promised to love me forever. Ryan started showing up more, always with some excuse, a networking event, a charity function, a casual lunch to discuss estate planning, and Miranda started changing, Subtle things at first. She'd mentioned casually that Ryan thought we should restructure our holdings, that Ryan had ideas about tax shelters, that Ryan knew people who could help us protect our wealth from frivolous lawsuits. I met with him once, professionally, to discuss these ideas. He had all the right answers. He made everything sound perfectly reasonable and perfectly legal. And he never once let on that he was sleeping with my wife. I found out about the affair on a Tuesday. Isn't it funny how life-destroying moments always seem to happen on the most ordinary days? I came home early from a conference in Austin. My flight got in 6 hours ahead of schedule due to some routing change. I was excited to surprise Miranda. Maybe we'd go out to dinner, reconnect a bit. We'd been distant lately, and I thought it was just stress from the business. Instead, I walked into my own house and heard sounds coming from upstairs that made my stomach drop. You know what I'm talking about. The sounds that confirm your worst fears before your brain even has time to process what's happening. I stood in the foyer of my $3 million house, frozen, listening to my wife with another man in our bed. I could have stormed upstairs, could have confronted them right then. But something stopped me. Some instinct for self-preservation made me turn around, walk back to my car, and sit there shaking for 20 minutes while I figured out what to do. I called Dave, my business partner, my friend since college, the brother I never had. He told me to go to a hotel, calm down, and meet him in the morning. He told me not to confront her yet. He told me we needed to protect the business first, figure out what we were dealing with, get our ducks in a row. I wish I'd listened to him. I really do. But instead, I went back inside and waited. When Ryan left 2 hours later, straightening his tie, checking his phone, looking for all the world like a man who just closed a business deal, I sat in the living room and waited for Miranda to come downstairs. She saw me and barely flinched. That's what I remember most. How prepared she looked. Like she'd been expecting this moment and had already planned her response. "How long?" I asked. "Does it matter?" she replied. And that's when I knew I wasn't just losing a wife. I was losing a war I didn't even know I was fighting. She moved out the next day. Just like that. No tears, no apologies, no explanation beyond, "I'm not happy anymore and haven't been for a long time." She took her clothes, her jewelry, some art pieces she claimed were gifts from her mother, and she left. Ryan helped her move. I watched from the window as they loaded boxes into his Tesla, laughing about something, completely unbothered by the devastation they were leaving behind. The divorce papers arrived 3 days later, and that's when I saw Ryan's name again, this time as her legal representation. I hired the best divorce attorney in San Francisco, Margaret Chen, a bulldog in Chanel suits who'd never lost a high-asset divorce case. She took one look at the papers and said, "This is bad. This is really bad." Miranda was claiming she'd been instrumental in building my business, that her emotional support, strategic guidance, and networking connections had been fundamental to its success, that she deserved not just half of our marital assets, but half of the business itself, half of the company I'd founded 3 years before I even met her, half of the sweat and blood and sleepless nights that had nothing to do with her. "She can't do that," I said. "The business existed before we married. It's not community property." Margaret gave me a look I'll never forget, sad and knowing and tired. In California, it's complicated. If the business grew significantly during the marriage, and if she can prove she contributed to that growth, she has a case. And with Ryan Miller representing her, she shook her head. "He's one of the best. He specializes in high-asset divorces where he can claim intangible contributions." So, what do I do? Fight like hell and hope the judge sees through it. The next 6 months were a descent into a special kind of hell that only divorce can create. Every asset was scrutinized. Every bank statement from our 7-year marriage was pulled and examined. Every business decision I'd made was reframed as something Miranda had influenced. Did we expand into the European market? That was because of Miranda's encouragement and belief. Did we hire a new CTO? Miranda had introduced me to him at a party, so clearly that was her contribution. Did the business valuation triple in 3 years? Obviously, that was due to Miranda's unwavering support during critical growth periods. It was insane. It was Kafkaesque. It was a systematic rewriting of history where every success became a shared success and every failure became mine alone. And Ryan. God. Ryan was brilliant at this. Every deposition, every filing, every court appearance was a masterclass in manipulation. He'd stand there in his $1,000 suits, speaking in that calm, reasonable voice, painting a picture of Miranda as the woman behind the man, the supportive wife who sacrificed her own career ambitions to help me build mine, the partner who entertained clients and soothed my stress and provided the emotional stability necessary for entrepreneurial success. Never mind that Miranda had never worked a day during our marriage by choice. Never mind that her career ambitions had consisted of spa days and shopping trips. Never mind that the clients she entertained were at parties I paid for in a house I bought with money I earned. Ryan made it all sound so reasonable, so fair, so obviously true. And the worst part? I could see some of the judges starting to buy it. We went through 3 different judges due to various motions and recusals. The first one was sympathetic to my position but retired before making a ruling. The second one seemed annoyed by the whole thing and kept pushing for settlement. The third one was a woman in her 60s who'd been divorced twice herself, and I could see in her eyes that she related to Miranda's story more than mine. Margaret tried everything. We brought in business partners to testify that Miranda had no role in the company. We showed email records proving that every major decision was made without her input. We demonstrated that her networking connections had resulted in exactly 0 actual business relationships. But for every piece of evidence we presented, Ryan had a counter-narrative, an emotional story, a reframing that made my facts seem cold and ungrateful. "Your Honor," he said during one hearing, and I'll never forget this, "we're not here to debate whether Mrs. Miranda Chen physically coded software or managed inventory systems. We're here to acknowledge that behind every successful man is a woman who made that success possible. A woman who provided the foundation of stability, support, and love that allowed him to take risks and build an empire. To deny her share of that empire is to deny the fundamental partnership that is marriage." I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and shout that she'd been sleeping with him for over 2 years while pretending to be my loving wife. But Margaret had warned me that would make me look vindictive and bitter, and it might backfire. So I sat there, silent, watching my life being dismantled by beautiful lies. The preliminary ruling came down on a Thursday morning in October. I was sitting in the courtroom next to Margaret when Judge Patricia Morrison read her decision, and I felt my entire body go cold. She was awarding Miranda 40% of the business valuation. 40%. Not of our marital assets of the business itself, the company I'd founded, built, and grown. The company that had nothing to do with her except that I'd had the misfortune of being married to her while it succeeded. At the current valuation, that came out to just over $8 million. $8 million. The courtroom spun. I couldn't breathe. I could hear Margaret beside me already launching into objections, already planning the appeal, but it all sounded like I was underwater. Across the aisle, Miranda was crying actual tears of joy and relief, while Ryan hugged her and whispered something in her ear that made her laugh. They were celebrating the destruction of my life like it was a victory in a game I didn't know I was playing. "We'll appeal," Margaret said as we left the courthouse. "This is absurd. No appellate court will uphold this. We'll fight this." "With what?" I asked. My voice sounded hollow, even to myself. "Do you know what $8 million will do to the company? We'll have to sell, or take on debt we can't afford, or bring in investors who will dilute everything we've built. And even if we appeal, that takes time. Time costs money." Money I'm now apparently giving to the woman who betrayed me. Margaret didn't have an answer for that, because there was no good answer. I went home that night to my empty house and did what I probably shouldn't have done. I drank. A lot. Expensive whiskey that I didn't even taste, bottle after bottle, until the edges of everything blurred enough that I could pretend this wasn't happening. At some point, I ended up in the study, staring at the bookshelves my grandfather had built before I was born. This house had been his before it was mine. He'd left it to me when he passed 5 years ago, and it was one of the few things that Miranda couldn't touch because it was technically inherited property, not a marital asset. My grandfather, God, I missed him in that moment. He'd been a tough old bastard, a self-made man who'd built a small manufacturing business after World War II and turned it into something substantial. He'd taught me everything about resilience, about fighting for what you build, about never letting anyone take what's yours without a fight. "What would you do, Grandpa?" I said to the empty room. "How would you handle this?" And that's when I saw it. A small metal box on the top shelf, tucked behind some of his old books. I'd never noticed it before, or maybe I had and just never bothered to look. In my drunken state, I was just angry enough and just curious enough to drag a chair over and pull it down. It was locked, but the key was taped to the bottom. Very Grandpa. He always said that if someone was determined to get into something, a lock wouldn't stop them. So you might as well make it easy for the people you trust. Inside was a stack of old papers. Letters, mostly, written in his cramped handwriting. Some photographs from before I was born. A medal from the war. And underneath all of that, a small leather-bound journal and a bank statement from 1987. The bank statement caught my eye because of the number. Even accounting for inflation, it was substantial. Over $2 million in an account at a bank I'd never heard of, Pacific Heritage Trust Company. And it was in my grandfather's name. I flipped through the journal, trying to make sense of his notes. He'd always been meticulous about his finances, recording every transaction, every investment, every business decision. And according to these notes, he'd opened this account in 1985 as a legacy fund for his grandchildren, for me and my sister. Money that was supposed to be untouchable, growing quietly until we needed it. But he'd never mentioned it, not once. And when he died, his estate had been settled without any reference to this account. It was like it didn't exist. Or like everyone had forgotten it existed. I sobered up fast, real fast. I spent the rest of the night reading through that journal, piecing together what my grandfather had done. He'd been smart, paranoid, even. He'd watched his own business partner try to steal from him in the 60s, had gone through his own brutal legal battle, and had decided that he never wanted his family to be vulnerable like that again. So he'd created this account at a small, private bank that specialized in long-term wealth preservation. He'd funded it with profits from the business, always keeping it separate from everything else. And he'd set it up with specific instructions that it was for his grandchildren only not to be touched until we were in desperate need, or until we reached a certain age. The problem was, he died suddenly. Heart attack at 72, no warning, no time to make sure all his affairs were truly in order. His main estate had gone through probate normally, but this account had somehow slipped through the cracks. His lawyer at the time had probably never known about it. It was the kind of thing that existed in the shadows of the financial world, legal but obscure. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I called Margaret at 6 in the morning, woke her up, and told her what I'd found. She was skeptical at first, but when I sent her photos of the documents, her tone changed. "If this is real," she said, "if this account actually exists and you're the legitimate beneficiary, this changes everything. This is inherited property, completely separate from your marital assets. Miranda can't touch it." "But can we access it? The account is almost 40 years old." "I don't know, but I have a colleague who specializes in estate recovery and unclaimed assets. Let me make some calls." The next 72 hours were a blur of phone calls, documentation gathering, and legal research. Pacific Heritage Trust Company still existed, though it had been acquired twice and was now a small subsidiary of a larger private banking group. They had records going back decades, but accessing an account this old, with the original beneficiary deceased, and no activity in nearly 40 years, it was complicated. I had to prove I was who I said I was. Had to provide death certificates and will documents and DNA evidence that I was actually my grandfather's grandson. Had to sign forms and affidavits and submit to more scrutiny than I'd faced in my entire life. But through it all, there was this growing certainty that this was real, that my grandfather, somehow, was reaching out from the grave to save me. The account existed, and with decades of compound interest and conservative investment strategies, it now held just over $12 million. $12 million. Money that had been sitting there, waiting, while I worked myself to exhaustion building a company. Money that Miranda and Ryan knew nothing about. Money that was mine, free and clear, completely outside the scope of our divorce proceedings. I didn't tell anyone at first. Not Margaret, not Dave, not even my sister. I just sat with it. This incredible, impossible gift from a man who died never knowing how much I'd need it. But I couldn't keep it secret forever, and honestly, I didn't want to. Because here's the thing about fighting people like Miranda and Ryan. They count on you being powerless. They count on you being so financially and emotionally destroyed that you'll eventually just give up and give them what they want. They're predators, and they target people who they think can't fight back. Well, I could fight back now. I called Margaret and told her about the account. I told her that I wanted to fund a proper appeal, that I wanted to hire additional counsel, that I wanted to fight this all the way to the state Supreme Court if necessary. I told her that I was done being reasonable and done trying to settle. I wanted to make Miranda and Ryan regret every single lie they'd told. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Are you sure? Because once we go down this road, it gets ugly. Really ugly. They'll fight back hard." "Let them," I said. "I've got time and resources now, more than they know. And I'm done being the victim in this story." The appeal was filed the next week, and this time we came out swinging. We presented new evidence. We brought in forensic accountants who showed, conclusively, that Miranda had contributed nothing to the business's growth. We subpoenaed records showing that she and Ryan had been in a relationship for over 2 years before she filed for divorce, casting doubt on her claims of emotional support and partnership. We demonstrated that her entire case was built on lies and manipulations designed to extract money from a successful business she had no legitimate claim to. And most importantly, we exposed Ryan's conflict of interest. He'd been advising me on estate planning and asset protection while sleeping with my wife and planning to take half my assets. That wasn't just unethical, it was potentially illegal. We filed a complaint with the State Bar Association. We made it clear that if they wanted to fight dirty, we could fight dirtier. Miranda and Ryan's confidence started to crack. I could see it in their faces at the hearings. The way they'd glance at each other nervously. The way Ryan's smooth answers started to have edges of desperation. They'd counted on me running out of money and willpower. They hadn't counted on me finding resources they didn't know existed. The appellate court hearing was scheduled for March. By February, Ryan approached Margaret about settling. He claimed it was because his client, my ex-wife, was emotionally exhausted and wanted closure. But I knew better. He was scared. Scared that we were going to win. Scared that his reputation was going to be destroyed. Scared that he'd miscalculated badly. "What are they offering?" I asked Margaret. "She'll take $2 million and walk away. Drop all claims to the business. No spousal support. Clean break." $2 million. Still an obscene amount of money for a woman who'd contributed nothing but betrayal, but a far cry from the $8 million she'd been awarded. And more importantly, it would be over. I could move on with my life. "No," I said. "Excuse me?" I said no. I'm not giving her anything. Margaret looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Look, I understand you're angry, But 2 million is a good deal compared to where we were. If we go to court, there's still a chance. There's no chance, I interrupted. We both know we're going to win this appeal. The preliminary ruling was absurd. The appellate judges have already indicated skepticism during the briefs, and now we have evidence of fraud and ethical violations. We're going to win, and when we do, I want her to get nothing. Not 2 million, not $2, nothing. She'll still be entitled to half of the marital assets, the house appreciation, joint accounts, things acquired during the marriage. Fine. She can have half of those, but she doesn't get 1 penny from the business, and she doesn't get 1 penny from me beyond that. I want her to understand that her lies failed, that her betrayal cost her everything. Margaret smiled slowly. All right then, let's go to war. The appellate court decision came down on a Tuesday morning. Another Tuesday. Maybe Tuesdays are just my day for life-changing events. The 3-judge panel overturned the lower court's ruling completely. Not partially, not with modifications completely. They found that Judge Morrison had erred in her interpretation of community property law, that Miranda's claimed contributions were not sufficiently proven, and that the original ruling would have set a dangerous precedent for future divorce cases. They noted in their decision that emotional support, while valuable in a marriage, does not create a property interest in a business founded and operated independently of the marriage. They also noted concerns about potential fraud and ethical violations, though they left that for other proceedings to address. Miranda got half of our joint savings, about $400,000. She got half of the appreciation on the house, which I immediately sold to pay her out another $300,000. She got some jewelry and art and furniture. All told, she walked away with just under $1 million. Not 8 million, not 2 million, 1 million, and she had to split her legal fees with Ryan, which had probably run close to $200,000 given how long this had dragged on. I won't lie, when I walked out of that courthouse, I felt something I hadn't felt in almost a year. Not quite happiness, not quite relief. Something more like vindication. Like the universe had finally recognized the truth and had acted accordingly. Dave was waiting outside. He hugged me, this big bear hug that almost cracked my ribs, and he said, "I knew it, man. I knew you'd beat them." "It's not over," I said. "The state bar investigation is still ongoing. Ryan might lose his license." "Good. He should." What he did was disgusting. We went out for drinks that night, me, Dave, Margaret, and a few other friends who'd stuck by me through the whole nightmare. For the first time in months, I laughed. Really laughed. The kind of deep, genuine laughter that comes from surviving something you weren't sure you'd survive. The state bar investigation took another 6 months. In the end, they suspended Ryan's license for 2 years for ethical violations related to the conflict of interest in advising me while in a relationship with Miranda. It wasn't a permanent disbarment, but it was enough to destroy his reputation in the high-asset divorce world. Nobody wants a lawyer who might be sleeping with their spouse while pretending to help them. Miranda left California. I heard through mutual friends that she moved to Arizona with whatever money she'd gotten from the divorce. She and Ryan broke up about 3 months after the appellate decision. Turns out their relationship was more about shared greed than actual love. Who could have guessed? I sold the house in Pacific Heights. Too many bad memories. Instead, I bought a smaller place in Marin County, something quiet and peaceful with a view of the bay. I kept the company, obviously. We brought in a new investor to help with expansion, but I maintained control. The business has more than doubled since the divorce finalized. Funny how much more energy you have when you're not being bled dry by litigation. The $12 million from my grandfather's account? I invested most of it conservatively, set up trust funds for any future kids I might have, and donated a chunk to charities that help people going through ugly divorces. Because nobody should have to fight the kind of fight I fought without resources. Nobody should have to choose between justice and bankruptcy. And I started going to therapy. Real therapy. Not just the kind where you vent for an hour and feel slightly better. The kind where you dig into why you missed so many red flags, why you were so trusting, why you chose someone like Miranda in the first place. It turns out I had some stuff to work through about needing to be needed, about equating love with sacrifice, about not believing I deserved someone who actually respected me. It's been 2 years now since the appellate decision. I'm 36 years old, and I'm finally starting to feel like myself again. Not the person I was before Miranda. That person is gone. And honestly, good riddance. He was naive, too trusting, too willing to see the best in people even when they were showing him their worst. No, I'm someone new now. Someone harder, maybe, but also wiser. Someone who knows that love is important, but so is protection. That trust has to be earned, not freely given. That the people who truly care about you don't need to take from you to feel valued. I think about my grandfather sometimes, about how he must have felt when he set up that account, never knowing if it would be needed but preparing for the worst anyway. About how he lived through his own betrayal, his own business partner trying to destroy what he'd built, and how he'd decided that his family wouldn't be vulnerable like that. He saved me. From beyond the grave, decades after his death, he saved me. Not just financially, though that was huge, but emotionally too. Because knowing that someone had believed in me enough to plan for my protection, to leave behind resources just in case I needed them, that meant something. That meant I was worth fighting for. I wish I could thank him. Wish I could sit down over a whiskey and tell him what his paranoia and planning meant when I needed it most. But since I can't do that, I've decided to pay it forward. I'm building my own legacy fund now. Not as large as his, maybe, but significant. Money that my future kids, if I have them, will be able to access if they ever find themselves in a position where they need to fight for what's theirs. Because that's what this story is really about. It's not about revenge, though I won't pretend revenge didn't feel good. It's not even about the money, though money certainly made the fight possible. It's about refusing to let predators win. It's about standing up when you've been knocked down and finding the resources, internal and external, to fight back. Miranda thought she'd found the perfect mark. A successful entrepreneur with more money than sense, too in love to protect himself, too trusting to see the knife coming. And for a while, she was right. I was all of those things. I walked right into her trap with my eyes closed and my heart wide open. But what she didn't count on was that I came from a line of survivors, that my grandfather had taught me, through his actions, if not his words, that you never give up on what's yours, that you fight even when the odds are against you, that you use every resource available, every tool at your disposal, every ounce of strength you have left. She didn't count on me finding that metal box on the shelf. She didn't count on my grandfather's 40-year-old gift coming to save me. She didn't count on me being willing to drag the fight out as long as necessary to get justice. And that's where she lost. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if she ever thinks about it. If Miranda ever lies awake wondering how it all went so wrong for her. She was supposed to walk away with $8 million and her lawyer boyfriend. Instead, she got a fraction of that and ended up alone in Arizona, probably still trying to find her next mark. I wonder if Ryan thinks about it too. If he regrets getting involved, regrets letting greed override his professional ethics. He was supposed to be this brilliant attorney, building a reputation as the guy who could squeeze blood from a stone. Instead, he's suspended, disgraced, known in legal circles as the lawyer who got too close to a client and paid the price. Do they blame themselves? Or do they blame me for not just lying down and accepting my fate? Predators always seem surprised when prey fights back, but I don't think about them as much as I used to. That's the funny thing about healing eventually. The people who hurt you start to occupy less and less space in your mind. They become cautionary tales instead of open wounds. Stories you tell to explain why you are the way you are, rather than defining characteristics of your current life. I've even started dating again, carefully, slowly, with much better boundaries. There's a woman I've been seeing for a few months. She's a professor at UC Berkeley, studies environmental policy, has absolutely no interest in my money because she makes her own and prefers it that way. We talk about books and politics and the future of renewable energy. She's never asked me how much my company is worth. She's never suggested we combine our finances. She's just herself. Fully formed, independent, not trying to mold herself into whatever she thinks I want. It's refreshing, terrifying sometimes, because I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. But also refreshing. Maybe that's the real lesson here. That you can survive betrayal. That you can come out the other side different, changed, but not destroyed. That the people who try to take everything from you only win if you let them. If you keep fighting, keep standing back up, keep refusing to be erased, you can make it through. Last month, on what would have been my grandfather's 95th birthday, I went to his grave. I hadn't been there since the funeral, couldn't face it during all the chaos of the divorce. But now, with everything settled and my life piecing back together, it felt like time. I brought a bottle of his favorite whiskey, Macallan 18, which he'd splurge on once a year for special occasions. I sat on the grass next to his headstone and poured 2 glasses, one for each of us, like he used to do when I was young and he wanted to teach me about savoring good things. "You saved me, Grandpa," I said to the stone, feeling ridiculous and profound at the same time. "That account you set up, that money you hid away, it saved me when I needed it most. I don't know if you're out there somewhere knowing this, but I hope you are. I hope you can see that your paranoia paid off, that your planning mattered, that you protected your grandson even after you were gone." The wind rustled through the trees. A bird sang somewhere nearby. The world kept turning, indifferent to my gratitude and grief. "I'm going to be smarter now," I continued. "I'm going to protect what I build. I'm going to be more careful with who I trust. But I'm not going to let what happened make me cynical. I'm not going to let Miranda and Ryan turn me into someone who can't love or trust ever again. That would be letting them win in a different way, and I won't do that." I stayed there for an hour, talking to a dead man about love and loss and survival. And when I left, I felt lighter somehow, like I'd finally closed a chapter that had been hanging open for too long. If you're listening to this and you're going through something similar, maybe you're in the middle of a divorce, or maybe you're dealing with someone who's trying to take what's yours, or maybe you're just feeling beaten down by life and wondering if you'll ever get back up. I want you to hear this. You're stronger than you think. The resources you need might not be obvious right now, but they exist. Sometimes they're financial, like my grandfather's hidden account. Sometimes they're emotional, like the friends who stick by you. Sometimes they're legal, like a good attorney who believes in your case. Sometimes they're just internal, that stubbornness that refuses to let you give up. You have to keep looking, keep fighting, keep refusing to accept injustice just because it's easier than resisting. The people who want to take from you are counting on you getting tired, getting poor, getting too emotionally destroyed to continue. Don't give them that satisfaction. And remember, winning doesn't always mean getting everything you wanted. Sometimes it just means surviving with your dignity intact. Sometimes it means preventing the worst-case scenario. Sometimes it means being able to look at yourself in the mirror and know you didn't give up. For me, winning meant keeping my company, meant exposing the lies, meant showing Miranda and Ryan that their schemes had consequences, meant honoring my grandfather's legacy by using his gift exactly as he'd intended as a shield when I needed it most. Your win might look different, but it's out there, waiting for you to claim it. You just have to be willing to fight long enough to reach it. I rebuilt my life from the ruins of my marriage. I found strength I didn't know I had. I discovered that the family I came from, even members I'd lost, were still protecting me. I learned that justice, while slow and expensive and painful, is possible if you refuse to give up. $8 million. That's what they tried to take from me. That's what they almost got away with taking. But instead, they got nothing. and I got my life back. And in the end, that's worth more than any amount of money. That's worth everything.